Foreign Minister, welcome to the program.
In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, I am ready to answer your questions. I would like to convey my greetings to all those watching your program.
In that case, let me start by the fact that you're here. You gave a speech to the Human Rights Council of the UN. As you know, there were many people who wondered why you would be giving a human rights speech given what's going on in your country. You did actually say that no country can claim to implement human rights perfectly. So I want to know whether you admit that Iran has really cracked down, has not just not implemented human rights, but has killed people. There are reports of prisoners and ordinary protesters having been assaulted sexually, having been tortured. We've seen pictures of police and other security forces using live fire against peaceful protesters. Is that what you mean when you say no country can claim to implement human rights perfectly?
You're of Iranian heritage, like I am. In the Iranian civilization and over thousands of years of Iranian history, we have human rights inscriptions on stones originating from Iran. Iran is the first country that has had human rights inscriptions in its museums, and in museums around the world. In our religious and Islamic texts, human rights is one of the most fundamental issues, and we have always been advised to observe them. The Constitution of the Islamic Republic of Iran also emphasizes them. We observe human rights very well. But when I said in my speech that human rights is not fully implemented by some countries, I mean those who advocate human rights, but in practice, they don't observe them.
I want to talk about your country. So what I want to understand is, are you therefore saying that killing innocent protesters, sexually abusing and raping women who have been arrested, as we, CNN, have spoken to at least one woman who says that, in a Revolutionary Guard detention center, summary trials, mass detentions of peaceful protesters, I'm talking about peaceful protesters now, is that Iran's standard for implementing human rights? That's what I want to know.
In Iran, we had an incident. An Iranian girl passed away, and we were all very sorry about that. But foreign interference and the Persian language media that are based in the United States and Britain focused their activities on encouraging and instigating the riots and acts of terror. And that's why peaceful protests ended up becoming violent, because of the foreign intervention. To the extent that even Daesh or ISIS exploited the situation to establish a presence in Iran. And I can tell you this, in full confidence, that our police and the security forces in Iran have not killed anyone with bullets or any other means in these riots. In fact, the police, they were not even given permission to use firearms. On the contrary, over 100 police officers were actually attacked by people who had all kinds of firearms and weapons they had procured from the unsafe borders of neighboring countries. They were martyred, and thousands of police were injured. And some foreign elements and the Persian language media that are financially supported and led by them claim that there was a new revolution and claim that a coup d'etat is being staged in Iran. And who is going to lead this? The head of the terrorist mini-group, MEK, the Hypocrites, which has martyred 17,000 Iranians, women and children. And they have been on the US and Western terrorist blacklists for many years. And then there's the son of the former Shah, who has committed many crimes. And I said to the authorities in Germany, would you allow a son of Hitler, if he had any children, to become chancellor in Germany today?
Are you really seriously drawing that comparison?
Yes, of course. That's what I told the Germans.
All right, so that's your position. You say that they're terrorists. You did say that there were peaceful protests. I want to talk about the peaceful protests because those are the people who have also been arrested, have also been killed, and essentially repression has worked. We've seen summary executions of at least 4 people, and the protests are less than they were. But I want to ask you to respond. I want to ask you to respond to the fact when you say the Islamic Republic of Iran respects human rights. One female protester says that she was detained inside a Revolutionary Guard facility for more than a month and raped by 3 different men. She went to a cleric, a mullah, afterwards because she was having suicide thoughts. She was so upset. CNN spoke with that cleric. Is that acceptable? Is it acceptable for a woman, whatever she's done, to be arrested and raped? And there are many, many, many reports of sexual abuse in this situation against women and men.
Firstly, in the peaceful demonstrations in the fall, no one was arrested.
So you're just denying that?
However, in those protests that had become violent, some individuals, some of whom who had entered Iran from the outside and were using firearms and killing the police, were arrested. You do know that the supreme leader actually issued an amnesty, and all those who were imprisoned were released, with the exception of those who had killed someone or were being sued. Regarding the Iranian woman that you mentioned, I cannot confirm it. There have been so many such baseless claims made on social media and in media.
Okay, these are not baseless and they weren't on the internet. It's CNN spoke to a cleric, a religious person inside your country and got this story.
We have seen some of CNN's reports that are targeted and false.
That's not true. We report the facts and we report the truth, and that's why you're sitting here with me, Mr. Foreign Minister. Can we move on? I want to ask you, you have a wife, you may have sisters, do you have daughters? I want to know what you think about peaceful protests for change in the way women are able to live their lives in Iran. The peaceful act of removing a scarf. What do they say to you, the women in your family? What do they say to you?
First of all, I would like to say that in Iran, we have the strongest democracy, especially compared to many other countries. There are standards and rules and regulations in every country, and the women have an important role in Iran, and they gained that role after the victory of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Today, the outside networks, they are turning the issue of hijab and headscarf into a political crisis. Women in Iran, within the framework of rules and regulations, enjoy extraordinary freedoms.
See, the thing is, I kind of know about this. So I also know that at the beginning of the revolution, there was no hijab mandate. Those who wanted to wear a hijab and a chador could, those who didn't want to didn't. Only several months or maybe a year after did the Ayatollah say, no, all you women have to go under the hijab. So again, I'm trying to find out what you and what the government is going to do. Because even Ayatollah Khamenei recently has said, women who do not wear a hijab are not irreligious. They are not violating religion. Some other people have said that. We've heard from the former Speaker of Parliament, Mr. Larijani, who at the beginning said, do we really need to make all this chaos over a hijab? So I want to know whether you accept it, because it's also traditional women, older women who've gone in the streets. It's men, it's young, it's very different than previous protests. Do you accept that women can have peaceful demonstrations for change and for their own rights? Do they have the rights? You say that it's the most developed democracy. Do women have the right, peacefully?
Unfortunately, in such issues, their approach is one of double standards. Let me ask you a question.
But I'm actually quoting your own leaders, Mr. Foreign Minister.
Just a moment,
I don't want to get into a discussion. I'm asking you a question about
I
your
want to ask
own
you a question
supreme
before
leader.
answering your question. Let's see where all this started. An Iranian girl called Mahsa Amini. She passed away.
Because she was manhandled by the morality
please.
police.
Just a moment, please.
Yes, a young girl, Mahsa Amini, passed away. They turned her into a symbol in order to change the system in Iran, in the name of defending women's freedom. My question is this. Ms. Shireen Abu Akleh, who is a colleague of yours and is a journalist, she's a lady, she's a Christian, and in broad daylight she was martyred by the Israeli regime. Who defended her?
Oh, Mr. Foreign Minister, the whole world Everybody defended her, and everybody condemned her death.
The result?
Everybody
What was the
condemned her
result
death.
of that?
I'm not getting into an international...
Why didn't they allow the issue to be raised in the Security
Everybody
Council?
condemned her death, Mr. Foreign Minister. I'm literally just asking you whether in Iran you believe women have the right to peacefully protest. And, by the way, as you know better than I do, sometimes the morality police are out being aggressive, and sometimes the authorities say, just take it easy, all right? And what do we see? Since this presidency, we have seen a crackdown on women and their dress and their rights. Why? Why does any regime need to prove itself on the back of women's rights, their own bodily space? Why? Why is that
My
a
request
test?
to you, look, you're supposed to interview me, but you're actually having a confrontation with me.
This is one last question, then I need to move on.
This is not an interview.
I'm trying to get an answer.
And this is not the way to conduct an interview.
I just wanted an answer, that's all.
Women in Iran have all the necessary required freedoms within the framework of the law.
I'm trying to figure out what
Do you
now
ask
are
other
the
countries?
confines of the
Do you
law.
ask the other countries who are in our region but are allies of the United States the same kinds of questions that you're asking me about the women's hijab? The issue in Iran at the moment is not that of hijab. What has hijab got to do with the MEK terrorists? Ask them. What is this hijab they are wearing? And they are based in Europe and in the United States. And this woman who wanted to come and become president in Iran, why is it that she has established compulsory hijab in her terrorist organization? They are friends of the United States. They're friends of the White House. Why should there be a double standard?
Okay, so I realize that we've probably reached the end of this little bit because you're not going to answer any more. But as you know, your government's reaction, violent reaction against women, has changed foreign policy and your relationship with many countries in the world. More sanctions have been leveled against you. The whole Iran nuclear deal is no longer willing to be negotiated. Even if you were willing, they're not willing anymore, the US and Europe. But first I want to ask you about another really important thing, and that is about Iranian weapons to Russia that are targeting Ukrainians during this war. Can you tell me why it is Iran's policy to send drones and other military support to President Putin that are used to kill civilians inside Ukraine? Why are you sending drones to violating all sorts of sanctions, but still also causing a huge amount of death?
We oppose the war in Ukraine, and we have not sent weapons to either side. And from the very beginning of the war, we have tried to stop the war, so that both sides focus on a political dialogue. This is the same policy that we adopted in the case of Yemen, Afghanistan, and various other countries in crisis. Regarding accusations that have been made against Iran with regards to drones, they're untrue. We have had defense cooperation with Russia in the past, and we continue that cooperation. But we have not provided Russia with any weapons to be used in the war in Ukraine.
Okay, so you've probably seen these pictures, right? So that is a drone, an Iranian drone that was found inside and recovered from Ukraine. This as well, with the president of Ukraine standing next to it. This they have compared to Iran. This is the Ukrainians.
Who says that?
This is the Ukrainians, and this is from open sources from like Yemen and other.
How can they prove this drone with just a photograph?
Are you denying it? Okay. Are these two the same things? This.
Let me explain it to you.
I will explain to you.
Okay, fine. But that's what the Ukrainians say, and those are the pictures of the same drone that you all display at military shows and fairs, and that have been discovered in Yemen and other places where you are active.
I will explain to you what happened.
A few months ago, I telephoned the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, and I said, "What are these baseless accusations you are making about Iran?" And he said, "We actually have documents that Iranian Shahed drones are being used by Russia in Ukraine." I said to him, "Look, we are ready for your military team and the Iranian military team to sit down and look at these documents and then make judgments." And we arranged to have such a meeting in Oman. And Ukrainian and Iranian military teams, they sat down, and they were showing us some very blurry, obscure satellite pictures. And they were alleging that these are Iranian drones.
But what I showed you wasn't blurry and obscure.
Our experts examined these pictures, and the pictures had no connection with Iran whatsoever. And for 4 months, we have been waiting for the second round of talks. And we expect them to come and present clearer documents. But the Ukrainian team keeps saying, in 2 weeks, soon, but nothing has happened.
So the thing is, you did say, the Iranian government did say, that you have sent Russia Shahid drones, but you said before the invasion. But apparently, according to Western diplomats, you've sent many after the invasion. Hundreds of Iranian drones have been launched, and over 100 of them, according to the Ukrainians, have struck their targets. They are civilian targets inside Ukraine. That is why Russia is offering to trade MiG fighters, that's the latest news, for drones and more things. Another Western diplomat says, yes,
Your question
you have
is
sent.
too long.
I know it's too long, but I'm trying to say the facts because you say it's not happening, so I need your answer. That's why there's sanctions against
you.
We asked our Russian counterparts, and they said, we have not used Iranian-manufactured drones in Ukraine. And we said to the Ukrainian counterparts, if you have any documented proof, show it to us. We will look into it. But the Ukrainian side did not show us any strong proof to substantiate that claim, with the exception of some media accusations. And I can tell you explicitly, as the Foreign Minister of the Islamic Republic of Iran, that we are against war. We are against war in Ukraine, against war in Afghanistan, against war in Yemen, against war in Palestine. And our president has made great efforts in order to stop the war in Ukraine. A few months ago, Mr. Macron asked the president of our country to come and mediate, because he has good relations with Russia. And then the president, Mr. Raisi, sent me to Moscow, and I spoke with Russian officials. And we are continuing our efforts. We think war is not a solution, neither in Ukraine nor anywhere else in the world. Look, it's military experts who should be proving this. You're a journalist. You're not an expert. I'm not an expert either. And now, as a CNN reporter, you are telling me that this is an Iranian drone? You know, I think that, incidentally, this is a drone that was used by the Zionist regime. The way you are asking questions, the way you are making allegations is wrong. Look, if Ukraine has any documents, why couldn't they show these documents to our senior experts when they sat together? Look, we went and sat with them.
So, no negotiations. Do you have any hope that there will be a JCPOA, a new nuclear deal? That's one part of the question. The other part of the question is, how much are you enriching to? There is one press report that says 84%. Can you tell us?
With regards to JCPOA, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been and is the most committed of all the parties involved in JCPOA negotiations. The party that left the JCPOA was Trump and the United States. The United States should not adopt deceptive behavior, and instead should return to JCPOA and adopt a constructive approach. Under the new government of the Islamic Republic of Iran, we have decided to continue dialogue in order to return to JCPOA. We have had very long discussions in Vienna, and the United States is accusing Iran. It is saying that the Iranians don't have the necessary resolve. They said, we were at a stage of reaching an accord, but it is the Iranians who are too demanding. I will tell you explicitly that in the past few years, we saw that the U.S. officials were unable to make a decision because of their own internal problems and the pressures they are under. They are still unable to make a courageous decision to return to JCPOA. And of course, the Iranian parliament in the past few weeks, especially since the riots and the U.S. interventions and interventions by 3 European countries in the peaceful demonstrations in Iran, have been putting a lot of pressure on our government. I was in parliament last week, and they said, who do you want to make an agreement with? with the United States and 3 European countries that have been trying to change the system during the riots in the fall? Why are you negotiating with them? How can you trust them? Nevertheless, we are still on the path of dialogue. We have a roadmap with the IAEA. And on 2 occasions, Mr. Opero, Mr. Grossi's deputy, came to Iran in the past few weeks, and we had constructive and productive negotiations. And we have also invited Mr. Grossi to come and visit Iran soon. Therefore, our relationship with the IAEA is on its correct, natural path. And we have said this to the U.S. side, through mediators, that we are on the path to reach an accord. But if the Iranian parliament adopts a new law, then we'll have to abide by the Parliamentary Act. So the window for an accord is still open. But this window will not remain open forever. The U.S. party has been sending us positive messages through diplomatic channels. But in its media remarks, they make very deceptive remarks that are totally different. And really, as an Iranian foreign minister, sometimes I have serious doubts. I receive a message from the U.S. party, emphasizing their commitment to accord. But then in the media, they say that we are not at a point of accord, and that JCPOA is not a priority on our agenda. Which version should we accept? Nevertheless, we are still on the path of reaching an accord. We believe a couple of outstanding issues between us can be resolved, and it can be finalized. But that requires the U.S. side to say the same thing that they are telling us confidentially and through diplomatic channels. And even if they don't want to tell the media everything, at least don't deny it in your media. And then tell us that it is because you are under pressure by the U.S. journalists and have to make such remarks because of your internal situation. Look, if the U.S. side wants to come back to its commitments in the JCPOA, they need the courage of their convictions. We have the courage of our convictions, and we have shown it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.